This is the three-component mixture separation. We have our sample of sand, ammonium chloride, and sodium chloride. Obtain an evaporating dish and put your initials on it so that it won't get confused with other students when it's in the oven drying. Okay. Turn on the balance, make sure it goes to 0. And then record mass of empty dish. Take the dish out. Empty the contents of the vial. We need to know the total so that we know the percentage of each component as we remove it. So now put a description of dish plus sample, then the mass of the sample be the subtraction of those two numbers. And now we'll go to the fume hood and sublime the ammonium chloride. Okay, so we've weighed the empty dish, we've put our sample in. Now we have to sublime and decompose the ammonium chloride. Get yourself a meeker burner, a ring stand, a clay triangle, and a retort stand, and the instructor will tell you where that equipment is. So place the evaporating dish on the stand, turn the valve on the meeker burner at the bottom so that the gas will flow out, then turn the gas on the back, the blue valve. So now we're going to heat that very strongly. You can see that it's very close to the flame. We will stir it once in a while, and soon we'll see the ammonium chloride sublime. So this will be taking about 15 minutes to make sure that all the ammonium chloride is sublime. And I think you can see just the beginning of the white ammonium chloride subliming. It'll get chunky, so just break up the chunks so that the ammonium chloride contacts the dish. On some occasions, what might happen is that if the dish is of a certain angle, we may get some ammonium chloride deposited on the outside, which will give you a false reading of how much ammonium chloride left. So we continue to do that, and when this smoke has subsided, we pretty well know that the ammonium chloride is all removed. We'll cool the dish and then we'll weigh it again, and then we'll know how much ammonium chloride has been removed. And in this sample, it appears that I have a small amount of ammonium chloride. There's varying amounts depending on what sample you get, so you make sure you record the number on the vial so that we know which one you have. Mine looks like I lucked out that I had very little ammonium chloride. We'll just give it another few seconds to make sure there is none. Condensing, and it appears that we're done. Turn off the gas, shut the meeker burner off, the valve on the bottom. Okay, and now we have to wait for it to cool. Okay, so we use tongs to carry it since it's hot. We'll set it down. We'll open the desiccator, and we'll put it in the desiccator. And we'll probably need about 5 to 10 minutes so that it cools down before we weigh it. Okay, so once it's cool enough, and we can go to the balance room and weigh it. So now we've removed the ammonium chloride, so it's going to be less. So the difference between the original sample minus this will give us the amount of ammonium chloride. Obtain an appropriate size beaker according to the procedure, and the beaker will be used to decant the sodium chloride after we dissolve it from the dish. So we need to know the mass of the empty beaker, so that when we dry the salt will be left behind. So now we'll go back into the lab, dissolve the salt out of the dish, decant it into the beaker, and then we'll proceed to dry the sand and evaporate the water from the sodium chloride solution. So now we're going to dissolve the sodium chloride. So we'll need distilled water, a 10 ml graduated cylinder, and a disposable pipette. So we will pour approximately 10 mils, and we will pour it into the dish. So I'm going to stir it just to dissolve as much as possible. Ammonium chloride is soluble, so what do you think might happen if you did not sublimate all the ammonium chloride and now you're dissolving it in here? So we'll decant as best we can without bringing over any sand, but I can see some particles are going, but that's the nature of the beast. So not only do we have ammonium chloride going over, but we also have some sand going over. So what would you suspect would happen to the mass of the sodium chloride? And then I sucked up the last little bit of sodium chloride as I could. And then we repeat the procedure to make sure we get all the sodium chloride, or as much as we can. So we'll put that in there again. And again, stir it so that would dissolve any sodium chloride that's left. Again, carefully decant. So decanting, leaving the sand behind. Any of you winemakers out there know what decanting is, or racking. So again, there's still some water left, so I'm going to, or sodium chloride solution left, I'm going to take that up. So notice it's wet. And why is it wet? What solution is making it wet? And what might that wetness cause the amount of sand to be off? Okay, so now we're going to have to dry this by putting it on a hot plate. Please remember to record the number of your sample, and here it's 66 because of the lines are underneath it, and well, it doesn't look much like a 9, but it's 66, so watch for the line. You have a number that can be upside down. So now we need to dry the sand that's in the dish, and we have to evaporate the water from the solution so that we leave the sodium chloride behind. In other words, we're drying sodium chloride. So this is going to take, I don't know, depending on how much water you have. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay. And some of the things you have to be careful is once it really starts to get very little water, right down to almost when it's dry, what's going to happen to some of this material in the dish and in the beaker? What happens when you're boiling your spaghetti and you forget and it boils over? So we could have spitting and splattering and the sand and the salt is going to be outside of the container, and then your results are going to be erroneous because you've lost some of the material, because we know how much sand there should be within a reasonable amount. You should get within a certain percentage of what we know should be in those components. So now it's just a matter of waiting and maybe do some calculations, making sure you've got your data properly recorded. So I've noticed that my sand is fairly dry because it moves, or else if it was still wet it would be sticky. And then I'm going to put it in the desiccator as before. We did wait a few minutes for it to cool. So now that we have only sand left in the dish, so we'll find out how much it weighs. So we record the mass of dish plus sand. Okay, so that's number 4. So the mass of the sand is equal to 4 minus 2. So I don't know if you can really get a good look in here. You can see that some of the sodium chloride is broken into chunks because it's starting to do that spitting and splattering because of that little bit of water. I'm lucky enough that it seems to be staying in the beaker. Sometimes, depending on how much water you used, the whole side of the beaker gets covered on the inside, and then there's specks of salt all over the hot plate. So it seems like this isn't going to be a bad one. So you have to be careful that it doesn't splatter and jump out of the beaker. So I'm going to move it around and see how dry it feels. It feels fairly dry. So I'm going to turn off the hot plate. I'm going to take it to the desiccator for it to cool, and then we'll go back to the balance to determine how much salt we have here. See, there's condensation inside, so that's not, hopefully that'll dry off, because that'll give us extra weight, because it'll be salt plus the water. We want just salt. So let's put it in here for a few minutes. Let's hope that water evaporates and gets dried off before we weigh it. Okay, so check it, and we see it's still wet. So that could be one source of error, because we still have water, which will be added to the mass of the sodium chloride. Let's go weigh it. So now we have the beaker and the sodium chloride, so we'll find out how much sodium chloride. As I said, we have water in the beaker. So what we should do is try to dry it, and hopefully it hasn't made much of a difference. So we'll go put it in the oven for a few minutes and see if we can evaporate the water. Because if we put it on the hot plate, the salt will start popping and spitting. So we'll put it in the oven. So this is the oven that's kept at about 100 or so degrees so that it evaporates the water. So we'll wait 5 or so minutes and come back and see if the water's evaporated and if we get a different mass for the salt. In about 5 or 10 minutes, and it's not very warm. If it's too warm, then we can use some tongs. So make sure it's cool to the touch or that you can handle it. Okay. And the water has evaporated. So now we can go weigh it again and get the true weight of the sodium chloride without the water droplets. And so we'll record another mass of beaker plus sodium chloride. So notice it has gone down significantly, so that water was giving us a false reading.